I keep thinking I've seen it all, and then somebody comes along and just outdoes the last guy. Now this guy, I'll call him the slow learner. His experience in the Philippines definitely stands in the top 10. This was about 5 years ago. I was living in Dumaguete. I got a new neighbor. So he moved in, and right away, I used to spend a lot of my time out on the front patio with my laptop. It was really nice shade, and it was right by the beach, so very comfortable. So when he moved in, he saw me out on my patio and recognized me from the channel. Now, he was about 65, I'd say, a somewhat slightly overweight American guy. He started to tell me a little about his background, that he was an accomplished businessman, and then, without me asking anything, he starts telling me the history that he's had in the Philippines over the last year and a half that he had moved there. Now, keep in mind, during this whole period that he was talking, I never got a word in edgewise. I was just sitting there listening to him, but he went into great detail telling me about 4 different Filipinas that he had interacted with. And the first 3 were pretty much the same story. This is why I call him the slow learner. Each of these 3, he told me their names, told me where he met them. It wasn't anything special. He met them online. All of them younger. They were anywhere from 20 to 23 years old. From what he described, they were, kind of on the wild side. These were not sweet, good girls in church on Sunday. And with each one of these 3, it was the same repeated mistake. He would get involved with them. They would start asking him for money. And he was pretty liberal with his money. He just thought nothing of giving them $200, $300 at a shot. And they kept milking him for all it was worth. And I imagine in his mind, he probably thought, well, I'm a businessman. I can afford it. I'm on a big budget. $300 is nothing to me. Because I can't figure how he could rationalize giving that much money to a Filipina that he's known for less than 3 to 4 months. So with the first Filipina, he's given her $300, $400 at a time. And of course, she has plenty of emergencies coming up. Everything, you've heard it all. The sick grandmother, the funeral, the sick carabao, the help my family raise pigs. I mean, just every story under the book. And without hesitation, because he wanted to keep sleeping with her, he just okay, here's 15,000 peso. Here's 20,000 peso. Now, here's the thing. He kept giving this money, and in his mind, he told me he was keeping track of how much money he had been giving these girls. For some reason, $5,000 was his breaking point. Once he realized he had given each of these girls, one at a time, not all simultaneously. He met the first one, he kept giving her money, it got to $5,000 or so dollars, and now he was going to put his foot down. Now he expected her to behave like a real girlfriend. Now he expected her to understand that the answer is no. No more $300, maybe $50. So, of course, this Filipina figured, okay, well, this chump has dried up, and she moved on. So then he, again, found another 20-some-year-old and repeated this 3 times. And as he's telling me all this, he's saying, well, these Filipinas, they're all scammers. Look at this, 3 in a row. They all scammed me. They all took me for $5,000 each. And then I put my foot down. So by now, after the 3rd one, he's already out $15,000. So then he proceeds to tell me about the 4th Filipina, the one that he's dating at that time. And this wasn't the only time I ended up meeting this guy. He ended up coming back. I'll tell you about that in a minute. So he's telling me, well, now I've really learned. I just can't trust these younger Filipinas. So what I'm doing is I'm going to go to an older Filipina and a woman that doesn't need my money. So he somehow, through the dating sites or whatever, met this older Filipina who was about 45 years old, apparently already owned 2 homes, had her own car. I have no idea how she came about that. I don't know if she inherited it or was a widow from a previous expat husband. I have no idea. But she was well-to-do, and he felt that he was now going to turn a new leaf, and he had learned from his past mistakes, and he was saying, now I've got myself a great Filipina because she's older and has plenty of money. So he spent, like I said, about an hour telling me all this. So I was like, oh, okay, well, sounds good. Welcome to the neighborhood. See you later. And then he would kind of pop in, kind of say hi, didn't really talk much about his situation. And then all of a sudden, I didn't see him for like 3 weeks. And he lived like right nearby. It's like anytime I was out on my patio, he would always pass and wave and whatever. So about 3 weeks went by and I didn't see him. So then after the 3 weeks, one day, he sees me on my patio, comes up all frustrated and angry and says, now what had happened is this wealthy woman had told him, well, I'm going to build a new house. I want a vacation house out in the province. So I bought, with her money, she bought the property and she had a house designed and she already had this in motion. She told the guy, now this is the wealthier, older Filipina, she told the guy, slow learner, that she was going to need him to supervise the workers. Because these were Filipinos and she was worried that they weren't going to put in an honest day's work or that they were going to steal the equipment or basically screw her over. So she said, well, since you're my boyfriend, I need you to go over there and kind of run things with an iron fist and, make sure that this house gets built. And he's like, oh, well, yeah, yes, dear. So this guy ends up living in a makeshift nipa hut with no electricity, no running water, with a couple of other sweaty guys on the property where they're doing this construction. And he's out in the province. He's not near town. It's not like he's popping in for 2 hours a day to check on these guys. He's actually there, living there. She's got him living in a nipa hut. No air conditioning, no nothing. And like I mentioned, he's older and a little heavy set. So payday comes around and he texts her because she's a good distance away and he says, hey, these guys are saying it's payday. And she's like, well, then pay them. You're my boyfriend, pay them. And so he decides to go ahead and cover the wages. And then it escalated and he's saying, well, hey, we need more lumber, we need more rebar, we need more concrete. She's like, well, handle it. You're my contractor. Make it happen. Go down to the hardware store and have them deliver it. And he didn't tell her, well, send me some money to pay for it. It's your house. Again, he thinks their boyfriend-girlfriend going to get married and this is going to be his house. And that's the way she's pushing it. So he never asked and he went ahead and paid for the materials and paying for the labor. And he's there working for free in the province, sleeping in this nipa hut. So the reason he came by my place is because he did this for the time that I hadn't seen him. And then he ended up in the hospital with heat exhaustion, which was no big surprise. So then, this is just the beginning of his problems. So then, he gets out of the hospital, comes to talk to me, and now he says he's going to break up with her. In fact, I believe he had already broken up with her by the time he came back from the hospital. And he's telling me, I'm done with her. I'm just not going to fall for this anymore. I'm done with her. And he goes, all these other Filipinas, they're scammers, and they're just all scammers. And at this point, I figured, I've heard enough of this. I'm going to give him some feedback. And I told him, really what you told me is that with the first 3 Filipinas, you got outwitted by a 20-year-old girl. Because that's what happened. None of those girls stole your credit card or hacked your banking account. They asked you for money, you reached in your pocket, and you gave it to them. So you can't put the blame on them for asking. You need to put the blame on yourself for not setting some boundaries, for not telling them no. I said, and this woman, the older woman, the moment she told you to go move in that nipa hut and work for free, why didn't you end it then? So he starts stammering a bit, but this was only the beginning of his problems. So then a few more days go by, I don't see him, and now he comes to my place, 6 o'clock in the evening, just as it's getting dark. He's desperate, shows up on my patio again, and he says, I've got a huge problem, and I need you to help me fix it. I go, okay, well, tell me what you got going on. He said, well, you remember that older Filipina? I was like, yeah. He said, well, I didn't go back to her, but while I was out there, I met her niece, and he said, I've been texting with the niece, and he said he got kind of a thing for the niece. And so now the older Filipina is angry at him because he invited the niece to leave the province, take a bus, and move in with him. Now, that's not even the worst part of all this. The worst part of all this is that the niece was only 16 years old, and the older Filipina saw all the messages he had sent to the niece saying that if she would move in with him, he would teach her about every sexual thing that he felt she needed to know. So now you can imagine he is in deep, deep problems because the aunt has copies of all the texts. She sat there and took screenshots of everything, and she was already on her way to the NBI, which is like the FBI for the Philippines. He's screwed. So he goes, what do I do? And I told him, I said, you really only got one choice. I said, if you want to get out of this mess, you need to go to the airport right now. Like, not tomorrow, right now. And unless you want to go to prison, you need to go to the airport right now, get on the first flight to anywhere, because the moment she gets an attorney to put a freeze on your passport, you're going to be on the run until they arrest you and put you in prison for corruption of a minor and who knows what else. And he was still livid that these Filipinas are ruining his life. He still didn't get it. Now, I know it's hard to imagine anybody could be this dense, but that's reality. And as I look at it all, if I was to draw a common denominator for what motivated him to be so stupid, it's that he had no self-control over his lust. Because he wanted those 20-year-old girls, and because he wanted this other underage girl, he let that motivation override basic common sense. Basic common sense over how to handle his money and how to handle himself. So I never heard from him again. I'm presuming he got on a plane and left, never saw him again. So any time that you find yourself doing something and thinking to yourself, well, this could be a bad idea, but I really like this girl, I'll just give her the money, I'll just stop, check yourself, and think, is this really a good idea? If it's not, stop the show, bring everything to a dead halt, and get yourself out of that situation.